Hello, I'm Brett Knowles from PM Squared Consulting. This video is a detailed conversation about how we can measure transformation in public sector organizations. To help you understand that, we're both going to talk about the concepts and also some case studies on how other jurisdictions have measured change to help ensure alignment, engagement, and performance during the transformation process. Our credentials to talk about this are as follows. We've been in this space for about 35 years, helping organizations measure their performance. We've completed probably 2,000 or 3,000 scorecards in literally every sector and around the world. In the public sector, our clients have included organizations like the IRS, the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff for Air Force. In Ontario, we've done the Ontario Ministry of Finance. We've supported the Ontario Ministry of Health, Social Services. At the federal level, we've done Departments of National Defence. We've helped multiple departments in BC, Saskatchewan, Alberta, and so forth. In fact, every book that Drs. Kaplan and Norton have written on the Balanced Scorecard use our clients as best case examples, as do most of the other books on both public sector and private sector performance management. For the OPS, the transformation framework, measurement is included at every step. And although I'm going to tell you a story from another jurisdiction, it's important to note that your current framework does have a strong component of measurement. I mean, if you think about it, you start off by building the case for change. That's laying down the overall goals. Well, those goals and the priority of those goals are what you need to measure. Building the transformation strategy is taking those goals and breaking them down into objectives, smaller time frame, digestible pieces that your teams can work on. Once we have those objectives, we can then assign them to teams to go deliver each of those components. Again, now each team knows their specific measures based on the objectives to achieve those goals. The transformation planning step is about applying a timeline to that. So now the teams know for each quarter what activities they need to get done to move the transformation ahead. Obviously, the measurement framework becomes an important part of how we communicate, engage, and align the teams, and of course, how we measure our successes and sustain it. So I'm going to take you through a journey that describes this for you, but I want you to know the story I tell, even though it's not your story, is consistent with this framework. Now I'm going to cheat. I'm going to whip to the back of the book first and tell you about the lessons learned. Here's what we've learned over 3,000 attempts at doing this, and hopefully you can learn a bit faster than us. Thing one is start early. Start measuring right away. Literally this afternoon when you go back after this seminar, begin the measurement process. Why? A few reasons. One is setting up those measures helps describe the desired state, how you want the organization to transform into. Secondly, it allows us to establish a baseline so that as you make your transformation, you can see the progress you're making. And that, of course, helps make the change real. I can see it, everyone else can see it. The second key lesson is never stop measuring. What do I mean by that? Well, measuring allows us to motivate the team. When we work in the public sector, it's often hard for us to see the good things we do. If we can measure them and measure them in a way where I can see the activities I'm doing this week, this month, this quarter, and how they're moving things ahead, that's highly motivational. Secondly, it proves to you and everyone else that your project is actually working. And of course, as part of that, it gives you feedback on what's working best within your organization, your culture, and the competencies you have. And then finally, it's a measurement that helps make the change stick. Now that we know that we've improved that transaction from 3 weeks to 3 days, or the accuracy from 50% to 85%, that measurement allows us to sustain that improvement. So those are the core lessons learned. Let's show you how they're learned. And I'm going to use the example of LA Social Services. Now, LA Social Services is an interesting organization. It's about 13,000 people, which is huge, but of course the greater LA area has a population equal to just about all of Canada. Within the LA County area. It's the second largest social services agency in the U.S. The only larger one, of course, is New York. The department currently serves about 3.5 million residents on an ongoing basis and has a budget of over $3.9 billion. And the problem is this: when Schwarzenegger took over as governor and we worked for him, there's like a 50% increase in caseload at the same time as a 25% reduction in budget. I mean, the California economic activity was horrible. It was just cavitating. And not only was the economic activity captivating, but we had about 1.2 million people fired in a very short chunk of time. So the pressures on social services were huge and happened literally within a year. Now, let's talk about their transformation. That was the need for transformation. How can I serve 50% more people, 25% less budget? The beginning is the same beginning we'd recommend for you. Let's understand what are the core mandates of that department. In this case, they had a clear mission to provide accurate and timely benefits and so forth. And so we're going to use that as a framework for transformation. We still need to achieve these objectives as an outcome of the transformation. So what we should be able to do is take that mission statement, and that means your mission statement, your plans, your budgets, and frisk them for the important components. So I'll highlight them in red. The important components about accurate and timely benefits, effective services, and so on. And we're going to use these already agreed to mandates to create what I'm going to call a strategy map. A strategy map shows a hypothesis of the cause and effect relationship between the goals that we have and success. So overall for the department, they have to provide accurate and timely benefits and effective services to individuals and families in need, which both alleviate hardship and promote personal responsibility and economic independence. So this group does similar to our social services. They not only provide social services and counseling, but they provide, food stamps and so forth. So if we take a look at their mission statement and the core objectives. So thing number one is we need to provide effective services. And to provide effective services, there are 4 things we need to do. So thing one is we need to provide accurate and timely benefits. And our hypothesis is if we do this goal, it will lead us towards this goal. Thing two, we need to help alleviate hardship. So now effective services are defined by our ability to promote accurate and timely benefits and alleviate hardship. Thing three, we need to promote personal responsibility. People have eventually got to learn how to, that they're responsible for taking care of themselves. And then the fourth thing is we need to enable economic independence of the people we're serving. So again, our hypothesis is to deliver effective services, we need to do these 4 things. And if we do these 4 things, that'll lead to success. Now, you can see where I'm going with this. Eventually, we can set up indicators for each of these and make sure that we're moving them towards this overall goal and make sure we're achieving that goal. Okay, that's what our stakeholders want. Our stakeholders are, of course, the people in need, the other departments, the city in total, and in fact, the state. Now, there are other objectives here, some of which overlap. So, for example, we need to focus on positive outcomes. Well, again, that's just defining deliver effective services. So many times our mission statements and philosophies and value statements have duplicity. They mention the same objective several times in different wording. We don't need to add different objectives. We'll just add those into the definition of these objectives. It talks about quality. Well, quality is another way of saying accurate and timely. Innovation is something new. So we'll set up a new objective for innovation. And we're going to call this Innovate Programs and Services. Now, you'll see later that this comes from their philosophy, but placeholder for now. Another objective is about leadership. And again, our philosophy defines that better, but it's about promoting shared leadership, teamwork, and individual responsibility. Next, high standard. Well, again, that's further defining effective services. So we've taken the major aspects of our mission statement and made it into this strategy map. Now, we talked about stakeholders. This yellow perspective is called internal. What internal processes do we need to accomplish to achieve these stakeholder needs? Enablers. What are the foundational elements we need or enablers to build and maintain these processes to make our stakeholders happy. So now let's go to another document, our philosophy. And again, I'll highlight the important aspects. So let's take a look. Enhance the quality of our lives, promote for themselves and their families. Again, that's economic independence phrased in a different way. Make positive contributions. Well, that's personal responsibility. Provide an environment that supports our staff's professional development. Well, that's a new one. So let's put that down here. That's an enabler. Support professional development. There's that objective I mentioned before. Promote shared leadership and teamwork. So that's where the wording came from here. And it's important that you use as much of that existing wording as possible so people know that you're not making this up. These philosophies and mission statement I've shown you have been voted on and agreed to. There's no point in having a further debate about them. We should just use them as they are. And so by using those same unique wording, people understand where these came from. A catalyst for community action is in fact a new one, so we'll add that in. Catalyst for community action. And this is a great one. We'll talk about this one later. Resulting in expanded services. Again, innovate, which I talked about before. There's where it came from. Innovate programs and services. And it talks about new public and private sector partnerships. So these are the objectives. And to put some arrows on it, if we serve as a great catalyst for action, that will expand our resources. It will help innovate our programs and services, and it will help us cultivate those public and private sector partnerships. So this hypothesis is an important aspect for us, has to be served as a catalyst. And if we do this, we get these other great outcomes. And if we get those great outcomes, we get these great outcomes. So the strategy map forms that hypothesis. What's more important is it tells us a story of how these objectives connect to create overall success. Now, what's interesting about this strategy map is it doesn't tell us what we are going to do. It tells us what our objectives or goals are. I'll give you an interesting example. So one of the problems that LA had, of course, was no resources and more people needing food banks and soup kitchens. We couldn't afford to buy new ones. And someone came up with the idea that, gosh, we could serve ourselves as a catalyst for action by going to the public schools. The public schools have cafeterias in all the regions where we have people who need a soup kitchen. And those cafeterias are idle after school hours. What if we could borrow those kitchens and cook up the meals for the homeless and feed them in the gymnasium? That would be great. And if we were that catalyst for action, we could create those interesting public sector partnerships, which would effectively expand our resources. And as we went to the schools came back and said, well, sure, of course you can. But we're a technical school and we have people who are going through culinary. Why can't they come in after hours and cook for the homeless? They can cook up the food. And of course, while they're cooking up the food, they earn their community services hours. So that was a double win for the school. In fact, they said, we also have people going through restaurant services. Why can't we have those students serve those in need? And so we had this really innovative program available now where the schools were providing the food, cooking it, and serving it up for those in need. A great public sector partnership. And we arrange that through being a catalyst for action. So the strategy map doesn't tell you what to do. It says the goals and allows people to be creative in how they solve it. In fact, in the downtown core where there weren't schools, we had business cafeterias. And they went to the businesses and said, hey, can we use your cafeterias after hours, just like we do with the schools? And the businesses said, sure, because of course they get a tax credit for it. But what they said is, and what we'd like to do is use our executives to serve. And while they're serving the homeless, it's their job to try to influence the homeless to go take a vocational course or college course. And the reason for that is many of our executives lead by authority, and I'd like them to learn how to lead by influence. And so while they're serving up in a soup kitchen, no one cares that they're the CFO or the CEO. They're just another person, and they have to learn how to motivate employees by influencing them, not by pulling rank and using authority. So again, an interesting public sector, private sector partnership was formed that allowed us to innovate what was going on. That's the power of a strategy map and how it enables transformation in organizations. It allows people to be creative and how to solve problems completely differently. So this is a strategy map and describes what the overall cause and effect relationship is towards success. Now, I'll take a look at a cascaded strategy map. It's one of the teams inside of this, Workforce Services. And within that strategy map, they've set their priorities. So these objectives constitute 100% of your strategy. And the question is, how do I allocate that 100% for what we need to do this year? And if you take a look at the objectives that are over 10%, that's kind of their focus. So this year our focus is on enabling management accountability so that we can deliver effective and caring services, so we can both provide accurate and timely benefits and provide great social services. So the weighting allows us all to understand what's important. It's a bit like, I don't know, I always think of as being a parent, my kids always had a problem figuring out what was more important, doing their homework or playing hockey. Now, obviously as a parent, you might figure doing your homework's more important because that's what's going to help you in the long term lead a great life. And so that priority setting is the job of leadership. It's our job as leaders to help set the priorities of the organizations. And as we achieve those objectives, we can adjust the weightings. So the weightings may change in an annual basis based on changes in need and budget and political influence. But it sets the priority and it creates alignment. If partway through the year, the politicians change their priorities, we can come in and change the weightings to match those and quickly let the organization know that, no longer is accurate and timely benefits important. It's now more important that we set up shared accountability or something. And it allows us to quickly change our focus. So that's the concept of weighting. The next concept I want to share with you is that of cascading. So we've talked about the overall agency level strategy map. Well, that needs to get cascaded down to teams and departments inside of the agency. And you'll see that each one has a different strategy map. I always think of this as like a hockey team where I have the overall Maple Leafs, then I've got the goalie department, the defense department, the forward department. They all have a different role to play towards the success of the franchise. So in this case, we might have an objective like deliver the right services. And as we cascade that down, each department has a different role. So operations has to build the right services. Service, well, they've got to figure out how to add those new services and support them faster. The people out in the field, maybe they've got to deliver with agility. And finally, IT, enable self-help. The idea is, as we take that overall department mandate, we're going to cascade it down to what the different groups are supposed to accomplish. Now, very seldom do we get to start off the measurement thing at the top. We often start off with some early adopter department. That's not a problem. We can create this map, and as the others get created, begin to understand and validate the relationship. And eventually, when we do the overall, we can make sure we've got it right. These strategy maps will change several times over the first couple of years, so we don't need to worry about getting them precisely correct. As we learn, we'll improve them. So that's called a cascade, and there's a bunch of frameworks on how to cascade, but we understand the idea that as you think about transforming your department, you may be thinking about starting off in one area or starting off overall. This framework will help you understand how those fit together. The next thing I want to talk about is how we link this to individual accountability. So if you think about it, we have those strategic objectives that we've built. Those objectives, we can obviously drill down to what are the processes and projects we need to accomplish to achieve those objectives. Well, based on that, we can obviously build those up to what are individual accountabilities to do these processes to achieve those objectives. Now, it seems obvious, but you'd be amazed at the number of public sector organizations that we go into where people are getting these 5-star performance reviews, but if we take a look at the overall organization, it's not fulfilling its mandate. Well, how could that be? It can only be if we haven't done this linkage correctly down to processes and projects. So I'm going to begin to describe to you what that looks like. But before I go there, I want to talk about the measurement side because that's our core topic today, and let's make sure we stay on topic. So we should be able to take that strategy map that we talked about before and put icons on it on how we're performing. Red means, well, green of course means good. Yellow means, we're not achieving target, but if you if I just put some focus on it, I can do so with the resources you've given me. And red means send help. It means we're not performing and I need more resources to do that, either more funds or more people. So if you think about it, oh, by the way, and for LA, they also added in these trend icons. So a green with a green up means it's improving. Here it's green but decreasing performance, and here it's flatlining. So imagine this is our first meeting. We're looking at our strategy and our scorecard. We understand the objectives and the weightings. Which of these objectives should we begin talking about? Now, many people mistakenly say this one here. Why? Because we're trained to firefight. When we see a red objective, we go and leap on it. But here's the thing. Maybe a red objective at 3% is less important to us than a yellow at 7%. So this is a bit like saying maybe your kid didn't make it onto the first string of the hockey team. So it's red on hockey, but they've got a B on math. Maybe that B on math, that yellow, is more important than not making the first string of hockey. So the weighting tells us how we should be focusing our attention as individuals, teams, and leadership. So here's the thing. We know that in most organizations, in fact, our research at Harvard told us that the average leadership team looks at maybe 7% of the data that's collected. There's all sorts of other data or indicators available. So imagine this. Imagine you're driving along and, I don't know, the gas gauge gets broken. So should you pull over the car and stop using it? Is that that particular indicator critical? Well, I mean, what could you do if the gas gauge is broken and you no longer have that measure? Well, what you could do perhaps is just use your odometer. Maybe you know you've got 300 kilometers in your tank of gas. So you're going to fill it up and then you're just going to track it using the odometer. And when you get close to 300, you'll go fill up the gas tank again. Now, it's not as precise as the gas gauge. You can't, run it till the idiot light's on, but it's good enough that you can still use the car. We call this a measure. It's measuring something precisely, and we're going to call the odometer an indicator. Well, here's what we know. In 100% of the last 3,000 organizations we've worked with, they've always had some indicator or the other. Now, in many cases, the signal strength or the accuracy of that measure indicator is not as good as you would like, but it's good enough. I'll give you an example. At the IRS, they use absenteeism as an indicator of employee satisfaction. Now, they could do things to measure employee satisfaction. They could do focus groups and employee surveys, but all those things are expensive and they're not very timely. The absenteeism indicator they get every single day, and it's indicative of those other things. Now, eventually, if I have a region with a high absenteeism rate, I am going to have to go in and do some detailed diagnostics and measure what's going on. But the indicator is good enough for now, and it's data that I have for free. So every organization had those indicators. When an organization only looks at 7% of the data collected, in the other 93%, it's there somewhere. So I'll give you an example. If we go back to LA, we have a series of different processes we need to do in order to achieve these objectives. Well, they have a whole bunch of mandatory and regulatory reporting that they have to do. And we can begin to link up those existing measures to those processes and understand where those existing measures link back to the strategic objectives. And so that allows us to harvest from the existing data. Well, how did we do that? Well, what if we took that strategy map and we listed our core processes down the left? So these processes, I can then say which process has a high impact. So process A has a high impact on revenue and on skills in this case. So now I know where the processes have a high impact. I can now figure out where I need to measure. And then I can go to that existing data and find out what indicators we currently have around those spots. Now, obviously, I'm going to want more accurate indicators around objectives that have a higher weighting. If I have a lower weighting, I probably don't need as accurate indicators. So we can begin to prioritize where we improve our measurement framework. More importantly, as we go through the transformation, we can understand which are the critical measures we should be monitoring and begin setting targets around those specific measures. As I said before, we can now link those to who are the process owners, so each process owner knows what their critical objectives are and how they link to success. So if I ran process C, I'd be more concerned about this indicator and this one because they link to 20%ers. Third is this one at 15%, and these ones at 4 and 2 I'm much less concerned about. So again, I have that alignment from the top of the organization down to the bottom, and I know where I need to be focusing my transformational activities. And if I'm not achieving the transformation, I know which specific processes I need to look at in order to achieve success. In fact, we found that on average, meeting time goes down by about 23% because I no longer need to go to meetings that I'm not involved with, and I do know who I need to invite to these meetings. So you could then imagine these turning red, yellow, and green based on the performance that we're seeing, and now I have that overall scorecard on the transformation activity. So let's talk about the benefits. Now that I've given you the measurement framework and you understand how it connects with the entire transformation activities, let's talk about what you get out of it. There's a couple of things. Thing one is you get agility. As I said before, as you change your weightings, it quickly delivers the message to people that own the process on where they need to change their focus. Thing two, it gets employee engagement because now I can see what I'm doing and the change I'm making, but also it makes it clear what I need to do to be successful, and I can see those changes happen. In fact, what it also does is it gives us what we call a platform for gamification of performance. Let's talk about that for a second. This is sort of the newest hot trend that we're seeing in California, and organizations we've worked with like Google and Yahoo are moving in this direction. Gamification is just the application of game mechanics to business. So if you think of what makes a game interesting, it provides for us this intrinsic reward system so that in the business world, if you think of a team, we should be able to earn more points if we work and make better progress on a project that is more important. So based on that weighting and prioritization, I might have 2 or 3 projects, one weighted at 20%, one rated at 4. If I make the same progress on the 20%er, I should earn more points. And what that does is it, again, enables those intrinsic motivators. So it's the same thing that makes online gaming so much fun. If you think of online gaming, it's just a process, no different than the processes you do at work. But it's so interesting that people get up early in the morning to do that process. They come home, work late at night on that process. If a new release of the process comes out, some people phone in sick. It's a very addictive thing. Why is it addictive? Well, because it works on our prime motivators. And in the business world, those are purpose. We want to know what is our purpose in our job, which comes from those objectives and the weighting. Mastery, I need the skills and the practice to be great at what my purpose is. And finally, the autonomy. Once I understand what my purpose is and I have the skills, leave me alone to get the job done. I want the scorecard, that measurement thing, to get the feedback. But purpose, mastery, and autonomy gives me what I need and motivates me. If you want to know more about this, read Daniel Pink's book called Drive, The Surprising Truth About What Motivates Us, and you will be amazed at the research that backs up how extrinsic motivators don't work. Being able to pay people more for better work actually destroys performance as opposed to contributes to it. And I know that goes against what we think we know. Read the book. It's fascinating. So where do people make mistakes? Well, a couple of areas. One is these things get way too complicated. They crumble under their own weight. We add in too many measures. Keep it simple. If you think of your car, you run that with 1 or 2 dials. But there's more technology in your car than there was in the Apollo spaceships that went to the moon. Now, you can run your car with just those few dials, A, because it's more standard, repeatable, reliable than the spaceships. But secondly, a way lower risk. If your car breaks down, you take a cab. If the spaceship breaks down, you got big problems. Your organization is more like your car. If it breaks down, I can call someone who can help us out. Thing 2, we get held ransom for data. Organizations go, gosh, we can't measure that, so we can't go ahead with this transformation. But my argument about using indicators is that in every single instance, there's already something you can use that you're paying for to be collected. We just need to harvest it. And then we now need to make sure that we have more frequent but less formal conversations about performance. Right now, it seems to be a big secret, or only leadership team gets to have it. Imagine, playing on a hockey team, but you never got to see what the other shift was doing. And you never had any conversations with the coach except, at the end of the game. It's ludicrous. So we now need to make this gamification of business, have these ongoing conversations about performance, but less formal. And then finally, we need to link those to the process and projects and people. Without linking it, it doesn't make sense. We look at the overall department goals, and I don't know what it is I do to contribute to it. I don't know on any given day did I move us towards those goals or away from them. So that linkage, that sheet with the strategic objectives on the left and the processes on the top, we call that an ontology. That's the secret sauce for getting people engaged and linking and making things successful. And if you don't link, you will fail. So next steps. First off, if you want my emails on the front of this presentation, just send us a note and we can provide you with a pre-implementation diagnostic that will guide you towards where you need to focus your transformation activities, and a post-implementation assessments to see if your measurement system is delivering what you need. Secondly, a recorded version of this session and many more detailed related materials will be sent to you from the transformation team, or you can just look me up on YouTube and you'll find that I have 300 or 400 YouTubes out there that describe in gory detail all aspects of what you've learned today. Thank you for your time.